So we're in ZBrush again, and for starters, let's begin with sculpting some very basic rocks. So how I'm gonna do this is I'm just gonna grab a cube 3D, make a polymesh, just gonna grab it out here, and I'm gonna go into edit mode so I can edit it. There we go. So one simple way of doing this, and the way I'm gonna do it, is I'm gonna dynamesh this right away. And after that, I'm gonna use the clip curve brush. And with clip curve brush, I'm just gonna press Ctrl and Shift. You don't have to press Shift. You can do this. Wait. Like if you let go of Shift, it's gonna stop the capping of the numbers, as you can see. If I'm holding down the Shift, you will see that these numbers will move incrementally by 5. If I let go of Shift, I can move them a bit more freely. So I'm just gonna do this, something like this. Oh, sorry. And I'm just gonna start cutting away at this potential rock. And before I do that, actually, I wanna press R, and I just wanna make this a bit like taller, like this. And that's it. I'm gonna press Q to go back to draw, and I'm just gonna press rotate on Y-axis because that's a bit of a personal preference. So just feel free and make whichever cuts you feel like you want. So I'm just gonna do some really sharp ones. Also, you can move this by pressing spacebar while holding everything. So let's just something like this, and then something like this. That seems pretty cool. And I'm just gonna cut out some of these sides. This is just to get something started. So, oh, wrong one. I think I want something like here. Also, if you want some more complicated cuts, you can press Alt twice to get these angled ones. Or you can press Alt once to get these curved ones. But I like angled a bit more. So I'm just gonna reapply the Dynamesh. Just drag your mask on the empty space to reapply. No, this side is a bit too flat. It feels a bit weird. But I think just adding like a cut, and maybe a cut in here, and maybe a cut in here. No, that looks a bit weird. I think this should do. Okay, just gonna reapply the Dynamesh. And now we have some interesting base to work from. Now what I like doing is usually I'll grab Trim Dynamic. I like to put the intensity to max because I'm using a tablet. And I'm gonna increase, oh, not this. I'm gonna increase the size of this a tiny bit. And let's see how that looks. So just going around these edges. There we go. Yeah, just sculpting pretty freely along the sides and everything. Making everything look nice and smooth, beveled. Just going a bit over everything. This is quite a simple process, like just going over the edges, making them look quite nice. So I'm just gonna do it real quick and be back to you. Okay, so here we are with all the edges beveled. And usually what I like to do is just reintroduce some of those hard edges, because if you can see this, this does look fine, and in some scenarios this might as well be like over, like this is, for some styles this can be it. But I like to use either orb flatten edge or trim smooth border set to alpha 28 to just kind of flatten some areas. But I'm not going to use much of trim smooth border because trim smooth border adds quite a lot of chipping and damage, and since this is a very simple rock, I don't want to do much of it with trim smooth, because trim smooth can be quite destructive at times. That's why I'm pressing very lightly here and doing some very light sculpts. Just very lightly over the edges. Just figuring out what works, what doesn't. Messing around mostly. And you can see it introduces a lot of realistic detail. And that's what I don't really like about this when I'm making something as simple as this rock. So that's why I use it like only a little bit here and there. Just a tiny bit to create some kind of chippings, damages, some kind of feel that this is not really perfect. Also, this is a personal preference. You might want a style that's different, but I'm showing you a few ways of doing this. Just so you can have a better arsenal of tools to use later on. So something like this seems pretty fun. And what I would do next is I'm gonna grab a orb flatten edge, and if I go over some of the places where I had trim dynamic on, it will flatten out and reintroduce those sharp areas here and there. And I like doing this here and there just to kind of get that sharp edge back. And that gives us a very nice stylized look. Very simplistic, very interesting to look at. And I'm gonna paint over some of these trim smooth places, but not completely, just getting a little bit of that leftover detail. There we go. Just gonna do here as well. Just going wild here. And I like to do this part with my mouse actually, but you can try multiple stuff. And this is a pretty quick way to add some stuff. There we go. This looks pretty proper. And if you want to check out how this would look like in a formation or anything, you can always press W and hold Control while pulling some of these axes to duplicate it, and you can just kind of scale it up and just pretty much check out how this would look in some kind of formation. Because rarely will you ever do a rock that's not gonna be a part of some formation, like, or on its own, because usually you can get one rock to do multiple purposes, even by flipping it around and everything. That's why I usually try and flip around my rocks when I'm working on them, just to see the bigger picture as well. It also resets your brain when sculpting bigger rocks, but we'll get into that a bit later on in the series. So this one is proving very nice, but if you don't like these flat sides, like these very flat sides, I usually add some kind of noise, and I add them usually through orb rock detail. I have it here. I'll have the link in the description. Orb brushes are completely free, so they're also very amazing to use for this kind of stuff. You can see it adds a lot of rock noise here. And what I like to do is drag it out relatively big, like this. Here as well, relatively big, pretty much everywhere. If you draw it too big, just keep in mind it will go over to the other side. Sometimes it's good to use the backface mask, but now I'm not really gonna use it because I'm not drawing too much with these. And now what I like doing, because this does look good, this does look cool, but it doesn't really look like it's a part of a rock. It looks like a normal map is slapped on this rock and that's it. So what I like doing to make it more part of this rock is I grab a trim dynamic. I'm gonna lower this draw size a bit, and I'm just gonna start integrating the map with the actual mesh. Just slowly. Actually, I'm gonna increase it back a bit. Just slowly flattening out some of the detail. Also, what I like using for this is H-Polish. It's also very effective at flattening detail, as you can see. And just flatten some more. Pretty good looking in my opinion. Just slowly getting there. See how now it's starting to feel like this is actually a part of the rock instead of just being a normal that's slapped on top. Of course, in some cases where the rocks are too big, this doesn't make much of a difference. But for the rocks where these detail will be quite large, that you're slapping on top of them, it's probably the best to actually kind of infuse it together. Just a bit here. Pretty good. Looking pretty nice, pretty detailed. And we will just do this. There we go. Pretty simple. And of course, if you ever want more sharp edges, always use Orb Flatten. If you ever want more beveled edges, use Trim Dynamic. If you want more grungy, more realistic detail, use Trim Smooth. Just mess around with these. I usually like to just grab the Orb Flatten, and now I'm using a pen actually to control it, and just again flattening some of the areas. Also, don't forget that you can always add by pressing Alt and going over the mesh, because it's easy to forget that, and that can actually add quite a lot of nice little details to the rock itself. So now this rock looks quite nice. It has all those nice details. It looks beveled, everything. One more thing you could do, I don't do this that often. Also, this one is a bit weird in my opinion, so I'm just gonna... Yeah, that's better. But I don't want this kind of feels repetitive detail, so I'm just gonna flatten it out on this side. Pretty good. So what I wanted to say is you can have this exported. This is pretty nice, pretty neat. But another thing I would like to do is if you go to geometry, you can go to clay polish, and just with all the default settings, click clay polish, and this now looks a bit more washed out, so to say. And it can create some weird details, as you can see here. I usually don't do this these times, but it can be quite interesting to play around with this and see what you get out of it. Because some of this can look pretty cool. See, this is before and after. Like, it can look pretty interesting with clay polish. Like this one with the settings on max is pretty interesting. It looks a bit more low polyed and a bit stylized, but I'm gonna keep this one as is. So without further ado, I'm gonna go into the next video. So this one is done for now. In the next one, we will cover how to retopologize this, like ways of retopologizing, and how to unwrap it, and then we will go into texturing the small rock. And further on in the series, we'll do, of course, way more complicated rocks, so don't worry about that. See you in the next one.